You are on a virtual background, right? Okay.
Yes, I'm using a virtual background that says Harappa on it. Yes.
Yeah.
We are just waiting for people to join in.
Yeah. No problem. We can give them some time, I guess.
How's the weather down there?
Weather around Coimbatore is
Humid.
quite nice. It's not hot. It's neither too cold. And in general, Coimbatore is not extremes, right? It's pretty much like comfortable weather as usually.
Right.
Rarely it goes to one end. Yeah.
Okay. So welcome everyone to Campus Charcha. It's great to have with us Dr. Madan Sendhil. He's the chairman of the Rathinam Group of Institutions in Coimbatore. Madan, welcome to our Campus Charcha. We are really looking forward to a very different take from you on the sessions that we've had so far, especially because you have a very unique background of all the people I've spoken to so far. And just to introduce you to others, Madan is actually a engineer. He did a computer engineering degree from the University of Central Florida, worked in Motorola, and then came back to India to head up the operations of TimeSys, which was a company in the space of embedded and open source software and engineering services and security. And he set up their centers in Coimbatore and Bangalore, but then joined the Rathinam Group, which I guess is into many diverse areas, and I'm sure you'll talk about the unique situation of the group. But education is clearly one area, IT parks, entertainment, and I guess the proximity of your educational institutions to the SEZ zone and the IT park creates a very interesting mix, which again, I think you'll talk about. So Rathinam Group has 4 higher education campuses, from what I understand, offering degrees in art, sciences, management, engineering, and architecture. So clearly all disciplines that you would typically find in a university. But with that, Madan, we are again very excited to have you here. What we thought we'd have you shed some light on is, as an entrepreneur, while you did start off as an engineer and worked as a professional, you turned entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, what is your take on all of this disruption that is taking place in higher education? And how does one tackle it? How does one survive? And how does one thrive in all of this? So maybe I can start with that opening and let you take us through your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. Certainly, yes. Like you said, I started with a technology background. Incidentally, my parents were running a school already. In fact, I studied in the school, so it's an old school. So when I came back to India to head up a technology company, just before, like you mentioned, TimeSys is a technology company born out of research in Carnegie Mellon University. Carnegie Mellon University, as you know, is one of the top ranked institutions in the world for computer science related researches. So TimeSys is a company born out of Carnegie Mellon's research. So just before I came back to India, I was working in that company TimeSys, which is inside Carnegie Mellon campus, so-called. I mean, you don't have a physical boundaried campus in Pittsburgh to say this is Carnegie Mellon University. You will see that the Carnegie Mellon University and the city merging into each other everywhere. You will have a whole bunch of buildings, which is called the university anyway, and then it spawns innovation and so on and so forth. So when I came back to India, I had my school, which my parents were running, and then I was running this technology company, and this vision, what I saw in Carnegie Mellon University, that the industry, innovation, education, all this coexists as a part of the city is something which always fascinated me, because the company was born out of Carnegie Mellon Research. So I somewhere had a thought that, okay, I should grow my education thing which my parents were running, plus my technology company, and then I should have a bridge between these two to emulate something what is happening in Carnegie Mellon or Pittsburgh city. That was the root vision with which I started my education-related career in 2002-3. In fact, with that, Rathinam used to run only computer science courses at those days. And I was running my company, and then thought we'll keep on creating synergies between these two arms, which always I felt is missing in India, which is something which I saw in US, which works perfectly in UCF or where I studied, or in Carnegie Mellon University where I started, headed some startup and all that. So that was the thought process. And now in Rathinam, we have, like you said, we have 4 higher education institutions. Yeah, time taught us that you cannot focus like in the US here, and we had to do all kinds of streams. But then we kept that vision of merging this living and education, innovation, and technology into one place. That is how the technology company I was running became slowly Technology Park, due to whatever decisions and business changes which are happening. And then since we always thought living, we had some entertainment and living zone also. So right now, Rathinam is a 70-acre campus, which is located inside Coimbatore City Corporation. We were lucky and blessed to have grown to that reasonable extent. So we have about 5,000 plus higher educational students. We have 2 schools, one school where I studied, and then we have an international school as well. Some 1,500 students in the school, and then we have about 3,000 people working in the IT parks, and then our own employees and things like that. So we have a 10,000 people campus located in 70 acres, divided into 3 elements. One is the innovation and industry, and the education, and living and entertainment. These are the 3 things. Our logo keeps talking about 3 different circles. These are the 3 different circles. That was a vision, and that's how we created. And this synergy, which we envisioned, that industry, living, and education together will create a unique synergy. We saw it really happening. Although we started it different way, but then we masqueraded it to the need of the situation. But then the synergy between these 3 help each one of these businesses, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So we are, yeah, tell me, go ahead.
This is very interesting. So let's, I was going to come to this later. We'll talk about disruptions later, but let's talk about this, because just to clarify, it's one physical area. There are 4 institutions. How many students did you say total?
Higher education, we have 5,000 plus students.
There are 5,000 plus students studying in higher education programs. And then you also have the school.
Yeah. That's 1,500 students in the school. Yeah.
Right. So the
1,500. Yeah.
So you have a full slate or full stack using
full stack. We have a full stack. Yeah.
School and four institutions.
Yeah.
And then you have the IT park, is it? Which is
SEZ and IT park. Yeah.
So both of them.
That's about 24 companies are there. 3,000 employees are working.
Right. And do you have lots of people from your college going to work there after?
Yeah, very much. We have a very good placement because of co-locating these institutions. And incidentally, we were able to get Atal Incubation Center, which is innovation and incubation, startup incubation center. Because of our presence in education and technology parks, we were able to pitch well, and we got the Atal Incubation Center also, which is functioning as a innovation and incubation hub, which is connecting all these things together.
Right.
That's how.
Do the industry folks also help you adapt your curriculum in any way so that can cater to their needs, and do they also provide any faculty or any internship training or labs? How does that?
Yeah. See, we have crossed one bridge by having 24 companies co-located in the institution. But there is no limit for how much of synergies you can create. Tomorrow there could be a student and a company employee who is doing a joint research. You can keep on innovating how all you can collaborate. But as of now, we do have good number of interns going to these companies. We are able to get reasonable level of placements in those companies. Some of the company faculty, company employees come and do FDPs, faculty development programs. And then they also tell, in a lot of our board of studies, that is course board of studies, these company leaders are there as members. So this level of synergies we have built, which itself was possible only because the companies are next door. But we, as a management of these institutions, we keep telling this is our core strength. We need to do a lot more with this. We need to do joint research programs. We need to do joint publications. We need to do industry institute partnership research work. I mean, there is an endless number of things you can do, right? I mean, we have seen that companies are born out of Carnegie Mellon. Like, if you look at how many companies are born out of Carnegie Mellon, that'll be, I'm sure it'll be 1,000 plus, which is born out of Carnegie Mellon. That's something what we should be able to create through these partnerships, ideally. But it's very difficult in an Indian environment where you are talking something which nobody will understand for a while. So, I've been talking this for last 15, 20 years now. So something is happening. But like I said, it's happening to a reasonable extent, but a lot more potential to work on.
Sure.
That's the point.
You are reminding me of my experience in Finland, where I don't know if you've been there, but you should, given your vision. What they have created is a bunch of, they call them universities or institutes, I forget the names exactly, but they are all institutes of applied sciences. They call them applied sciences. So they have the typical research universities, which are not so tightly connected. But these Institute of Applied Sciences are very interesting. They're exactly your model, which is that you will run a institution, full institution of 4,000-5,000 students. But on the campus itself, there is space for companies. So it's like a corporate park or an industry park or an SEZ type or an IT park type environment. So companies very normally locate themselves on the university campus and vice versa.
That's exactly what we have done. I have heard a lot about Finland and education. I always wanted to go. In fact, just before this lockdown, I had a planned trip. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. I'll keep this certainly in mind. But that's exactly what we tried and we are doing right now.
Yeah, no, so it's, please let me know if you ever want to go. It's believe it or not, Finland is just a 6-hour flight. Not 6 hours on Finnair. It's not that far. The time difference is only 3.5 hours. So it's not a big time difference. And now lots of students are going to Finland to this applied sciences universities because they go directly into employment. And it's very, so in a way, this is a disruption you are creating, isn't it?
We have been trying to do that, and reasonably, since this is innovative, it helped us sustain. It helped us because education, last 10 years is not very, very opportunistic time, Yes. So this synergy is what I said, helped us sustain and survive and grow. So in that way, it was a disruption in terms of the kind of methodologies which we have created. For example, this online content and things like that, we have been doing even earlier. That's something which gave us an edge.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. But before we go there, I'm just wondering, what learnings might there be for people in Indian education where they do not have the fortune of being co-located like you are?
You hit the point right. Actually, it's a huge challenge, I'm telling you, because you are doing something which normally doesn't, even statutory doesn't allow you, right? Suppose your statutory says that you need 5 acres for a college, right? And then you keep the 5 acres, but then you put another 5 acres nearby and do a technology park. Let's say we do that, but the mindset of the statutory guys will say, what are these guys doing? Are they utilizing the college infrastructure? There is nothing wrong about it. If you technically see it, there's nothing wrong about it. But there are a lot of statutory headaches and things like that, which you have to work around. You need to lease it to the companies. Companies should feel secure. There are so many factors which will challenge this model. And initially, maybe faculty also sometimes feel that they are giving importance to the companies.
Yeah.
It's not like a traditional single simple campus. Only students and faculty come and go out of the campus every day, right? It will give a multicultural thing. Your security aspects will be different. Few people will say it's insecure because anybody can come into the campus. That's what I will immediately tell. In one of the, if you go to Carnegie Mellon, you will not even know which is the building, which is the Carnegie Mellon building. Your buildings are going to be secure. Your access control for the building will be there. What's wrong if people walk into the campus? In fact, in US, there are programs or there are initiatives which will make sure public go through your campus. It's a way of advertising your campus. So, I mean, these things are something good since I have seen it. But somebody who has not seen it, at least I'm sure the audience are more from the promoter's point of view. For us, at least it's okay. But when it comes to a student or a faculty or a parent, sometimes it creates some insecurity. Statutory people will create some issues. There might be a hard-headed guy who will talk all kinds of things. So these are the issues which you really have to face, and only your conviction, okay, this is the right model. My goal is delivering good education. All these other parameters are sub-elements of it, which is a challenge which we have to face. That conviction has to be there to try something like this.
Very nice. You've fired up my imagination of how to do this. I think a lot of the problems also is that everywhere in the world, particularly in India, the real estate costs are so high, and real estate is also so precious.
Yeah,
that's another consideration. But moving on from there, one question we had about that we even got in advance from an audience member who's here is that it seems that in the Western world, it seems that industries follow the higher education institutions, or they are quite attracted to partnerships with higher education institutions. Whereas the question he's asking is that, is there an apathy in India of industry towards institutions, and is that one of the factors, or vice versa?
I don't think so. I don't think so. At least when I operated practically, I'm telling you, the thing is, see, whether it is, I was in UCF doing my master's after my engineering in India.
Yeah.
Motorola used to be a great partner for UCF.
Mm-hmm.
I joined Motorola right after UCF. During when I was in UCF, I was in a part-time job in Motorola. So these synergies were there. When you look at from the Indian point of view, are the companies hesitating to come into the institution? If you ask me that, I don't think that is the case. They're hesitating to come because you are not able to provide them anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you create programs or if you create schemes where the companies will benefit out of it, they will come. Suppose a company is doing a research, it's spending $1 million or 1 crore to do that research. If you're going to tell that, okay, I will deliver to you at 50 lakhs, why wouldn't they come? Those guys are there to make money out of it. Okay, you keep the IP, you give me the 50 lakhs, I'll do that research. But do we have the faculty to do the research? That's the question. All the challenges institutions face in partnering with the industry will come due to institutions deficiency, is my view.
Okay.
Okay.
You
There is
think-
no hesitation.
Yeah.
They will come. They are hesitant because we are not able to provide anything. If we
Right.
are able to proceed, these guys come to recruit every year, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a problem, right?
Yeah.
They need students, so they come. They don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
Like that, if there are schemes there where we take care of their needs, they will come. There's no question about it. Unfortunately, on the other side, faculty is very hesitant to approach the approach the industry, display their capability, market their capability. Unfortunately, the way Indian institutions are structured, we have not taught our faculty to market themselves, which is something very, very important, right? In the US or West, what happens is one course will be given by multiple faculty. So the faculty will go and market himself to get more students enrolled in his course. That, I guess, to some extent, it's starting to come in India through the CBCS and all that, but then not to a large extent, right? So our faculty have not learned to market themselves. You tell a faculty, I have close to about 300 plus faculty. If I tell a faculty, you go into this company next door, you go tell these are all your capabilities and tell that, okay, I will do some work for you. You tell like that and you invite them and you say that I'll give you a 50% bump if you just go talk to them, okay, and impress them. You will find very few takers to go just do that. They're so hesitant to go market themselves.
Right.
That's a huge challenge. Okay. So the challenge is in making our faculty go and approach the industry. Challenge is not in getting the industry into us. That's what I have faced.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we have to be more proactive and be more willing to give industry the proposition, because industry is going to be somewhat transactional. They are going to want to see the benefit. Otherwise, why would they waste their time? And
absolutely.
They are
whether
not
it's research or internship or employment, whatever we want to do, they will need us, then they will come. Yeah.
I know, Madan, that you had some thoughts in mind about your ideas around what some of the disruptions are and how to deal with them and so on. So would you like to share that now?
Yeah, certainly. I would request
Shefali will
get the slide to get opened up. It's not big. Audience need not worry about it. It's just a 3-slide thing. I'm not going to go slide by slide presentation. It's just a thought process there, which is there. In my view, like I said, there are tremendous opportunities. Like, since we are talking about this particular thing, there is, that's going to be in my third slide. There is tons of opportunities in higher education today. We are in the opportunity slide as of now, which is the third slide actually in my presentation. There are tons of opportunities because there are enough things which you can disrupt and make changes to. Since there are so many challenges, you can make a small difference in terms of how you deliver. You can make a small difference in terms of how you structure. All these small changes can give you a lot of opportunity. There are tons of students to educate. There is a lot of learning which has to be delivered. So we have enough jobs, so we will survive. Let me go to the first slide, since we are talking about disruptions, right? So when we look at it, in my opinion, there are Indian higher education is going to go through a sea change, which none of us have seen. Even though I am talking about it, I have not seen that in Indian environment either. Neither any of the promoters would have seen it so far. That's my view, because it's getting disrupted in multiple ways, right? One is NEP. The first and foremost is National Education Policy, which is coming and changing the way you are looking at the fundamental document in terms of higher education, envisages how education is being conducted in the US, and it relates to how we have to transform our institutions to that way. So that's how the NEP is structured. It expects institutions to consolidate. It expects them to cluster around. It expects minimum strength in an institution to be some 5,000 or 3,000 or something like that. So huge consolidation. It expects interdepartmental courses. Today, if you look at it in the way Indian education is structured, if I need to give a course which connects physiotherapy and mechanical engineering, right? Let's say, if I have to give a course, my statutory system will not even allow me to do that. I have to maintain separate set of faculty for my mechanical engineering. I have to get separate set of, I mean, physiotherapy is even a separate institution itself. That's how our statutory is. So, and the NEP is expecting interdepartmental courses between these two, simply which you cannot even envisage in the current environment. So, and then it talks about multiple exits. You give a diploma, you give an advanced diploma, and then you give a degree at each stage. That's what it's expecting. Then it expects people to move from one institution to another institution, take credits from other institutions. These are all kind of things which Indian environment has not seen even 10% of it. So that's a drastic disruption. NEP itself, whether it's good, I think it's good, because whether we are delivering right kind of education, there's a lot of challenges. I don't think overall higher education we are doing enough justice. So I think these disruptions are required, and these things will make a good change, is what my feeling is. But everybody has to consume, right? Our faculty has to consume, our students have to consume, market has to consume, everybody has to consume. So much of changes, and we need to survive this disruption also from an entrepreneur's point of view. We are talking all this from an entrepreneur's point of view. So from our point of view, I think many of what we have to see is, unless we adapt for these NEP's changes, we might have to go out of business. We would have invested crores and crores in our infrastructure and things like that, but we might have to go out of business. So that's the disruption, and that's a challenge which it is posing.
Oh, that's a big statement, that you feel that the NEP can actually be so far-reaching that your whole model will actually get disrupted.
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, it even says that very openly, right? They only want large institutions. They don't want small institutions. It clearly states that. They envisage the smaller institutions to go away. It's open in that aspect, actually.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I never saw it that way, because you're right. But, if you think about aggregation and massing up of institutions, then what happens to the smaller institutions?
Yeah, and not only that, suppose there is an institution with 500 students, and they give a window of 5 years to come to 3,000 students, which is not going to be possible, right?
Yeah.
What are the alternatives those institutions will have? And especially when all the institutions are growing, these guys will not even be able to maintain the 500 student strength. I mean, even for 5,000 students like ours, that challenge is there, right? I mean, there are institutions at 10,000, 20,000, 1 lakh students. Those, the depth of pockets are bigger, and the government regulation is going to favor larger consolidation. So in fact, in our association, I talk to my promoters, other peer promoters who are nearby, like we can create a structure where we will consolidate. That's a good potential, right? If there are like-minded institutions, they can all bring it to like mergers and acquisitions, right? If you look at it from the company's point of view, they acquire and become bigger company, right? So like those kind of changes, which we have not seen in Indian education environment, has to happen for you to survive.
By the way, mergers and acquisitions in education don't even happen globally. So that's a massive disruption. If you have to merge with other institutions in your area or aggregate, then that would be unprecedented.
Yeah. But in India, you may have to do that. You may have to do that to survive.
Sure, no,
that's how.
Yeah, no, you are
That's how
saying that,
the,
yeah, you are saying that that is an imperative.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, my second point, if you look at it, we all talked about aeronautical engineering 3-4 years back and invested like what, 2-3 crores to start aeronautical engineering. And suddenly aeronautical engineering is not there. Then data sciences and artificial intelligence is there. If you start investing into that, capital will be, if you properly invest into it again, that will be 1 or 2 crores. So each year something other keeps on evolving. We keep investing as an investor into that, and then that course goes away, and then something else comes in before even we recover our capital. So it keeps on happening, right? And the way market is changing is too rapid for us to keep pace of things. Too rapid for, so we and statutorily there are challenges as well. If you are going to start a see, in the US or anywhere in the world, you can go rent a premise, you can go rent an equipment, keep it there, and run the course. What you have to do, you need space, you need equipments to teach. Whether you, however you acquire the equipment is doesn't matter. So they allow that. But in Indian statutory environment, it doesn't allow that. It expects you to have all the equipments owned by you. It expects you to own the land. It expects you to own the building. You invest all these things properly and then create this thing, and 2-3 years later, that course is gone, right? We have seen that happening in several education, B.Ed and all those courses. We have seen that, I mean, n number of courses. If you talk about multimedia, each course will come up, and then the structure, Indian education structure, insists that you need to have that asset-heavy infrastructure, or which is owned by you, which is again has to be disrupted. Will get disrupted. As a matter of fact, I would like to give the audience a takeaway also. AICTE did not allow rented land for a long time, unless it is a government land. I was petitioning, writing to AICTE, and I met the present chairman, Anil Ji, also, and presented this case several times. If you look at schools, right, CBSE schools for that matter, its rented premises is allowed. So
30 plus years allowed.
30 plus years rented premises is allowed. So formal capital is flowing into that field. Private equity is there. So you can rent any premise, run an institution. Like that, higher education, it was not allowing that. So we kept, at least I kept doing it. I don't know whether there were other forces, but in the last years, AICTE's handbook, they started allowing leased premises.
Right.
I think it's 49 years or something like that. Leased premises is permitted. So which is a very big change, by the way, because we don't have to own the building, right? We can go lease it for a long term, and we can still run the courses. So like that, there has to be a lot of new innovative thought process which has to go into each one of us, how to really run this education without investing heavily in infrastructure.
Got it.
Investing heavily in infrastructure is a huge risk for educationists like us, because the way the courses are going to change, the way NEP is going to disrupt it, all these things will be too complex.
Madan,
look at
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Madan, the point about formal skill training programs that you're talking about here, are you talking about non-formal institutions doing skill training programs like
No, not that. That is the our NEQF and your this what is that? All the
NSDC,
PMKK, PMKEY, NSDC kind of courses, all that coming, right? So let's finish the online thing. See, tomorrow a lot of foreign, even IIT Chennai is giving you a BSc degree now, which is purely online.
Yeah.
So today you have to compete against that program. Will a student join us when an IIT is going to give a degree? And if he is able to do everything online, how are we going to compete against it?
Yeah.
Foreign degree programs are also going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
If they're going to deliver online, maybe Carnegie Mellon University or Harvard University degree may not be recognized in India, but who will care when you have a Harvard University degree, whether Indian government recognizes or not? So there are potential possibilities that online, a good percentage of students might go for online education as well. That is again a challenge and a disruption. How do we adapt to that is also something which each one of us have to think. I think we need to start exploiting it. I think we need to jump into that forum also and make a difference between IIT giving you an online degree program in computer science. I am going to give you a BSc degree program. What you don't get there versus what I get, which I can offer. Some delta has to be shown.
Yeah.
Like the distance education died because it was not able to deliver. This might be different. So like that, we have to start looking at ways to differentiate from online and foreign degree programs. That's one thing which we have to do. The formal skill training program, what I was talking to you about is the NSDC and all that. But fortunately or unfortunately, from a promoter point of view, it's unfortunate. 2 years back, forget the Corona period, right? I'm talking about 2019 intake, okay? 2020 was Corona affected. We are doing 2021 right now, which we don't know what we are going to do, how we are going to land up. 2019 intake, at some point, I got a forum discussion like this. I'm with 10 institution promoters on a table, and we are discussing how is the intake so far. I mean, it's like advanced stage, it's like July, where we might even be closing the admissions normally, and only 50% of the seats of getting filled. I thought it's only us, but then all over the country it was happening. We were all wondering what's going on. And then I went to our Tamil Nadu association and then discussed the same thing, and everybody is saying the same thing. From Delhi to Coimbatore, if this is happening, what was going on? And then few of us thought that we should study this but at the end of the year, we all compensated and we got reasonable numbers. But then there was a tremendous drop. I think only few institutions would have gotten over it. 2019 intake would have been far lesser than their 2018 intake. Most of the cases, 90% of the cases. The reason is, in that year, a lot of NSDC programs got launched. Okay, this is an outcome which came out of a study. There could be a potential possibility that it's wrong. There was about 15-20% of the students who passed 12th standard, okay, but they could not go to formal education, who would have been pressed to somehow go into some institution, paying some concessional fees or whatever. They didn't go because NSDC programs were there, which was attracting. See, NSDC programs are so diverse, right? If you look at PMKK, every district has a PMKK. And each one of the PMKKs don't get enough students. How much it costs? It's free. During your entire course, your stay, food, education, and employment is free, completely free. In fact, I run an NSDC center also. So if you don't get students for stay, food, uniform, education, and employment, placement guaranteed. If your government is giving that program, why wouldn't it be better than a formal degree program? Well, one thing is you will not have a degree, right? It's only a training program. That's the only thing which you can say, okay, I'll offer in my college where the NSDC cannot offer. But that is also not true. NSDC and NEQF has a program now where somebody is entering into a skill track, can move on from level 1 to level 7. Level 7 is a PhD program. Okay. Level 4 in my, I think level 5 is a degree, and level 6 is PG, and level 7 is a PhD. So you can get a computer science degree entering through the skill track also, which is a huge disruption. More and more students who come to know about it, they will do this. Right now, the awareness is also lacking on the programs. People generally think college is a prestige, but if somebody understands that degree can be gotten through another track where your food, stay, uniform, employment, everything is guaranteed, then if people start taking that road, where will we go for students? And this factor did disrupt us in the year 2019 in our study, not my institution. In a group of institutions study, we saw that 15%, 20% impact it was there in that year all over the country. But then natural growth is there in number of students and all that. So 2020 and all that, we got Corona. So we don't know what really happened. So 2021, we don't know yet. So there is an impact due to this formal skill training program in terms of the intake in higher education institution. And certainly that's a disruption. How we will have to face that, how we will, in fact, there are ways to leverage that for our formal education. It's my view. How yes. we have to find, as entrepreneurs, we need to find ideas to get around all these challenges, right? So we need to use each one of these challenges as a advantage to leverage ourselves. So that's why we have an NSDC center ourselves and then trying to leverage out of it. So that's again a disruption which entrepreneurs have to look at very seriously. Statutory high-risk infrastructure, which is my original point, which I spoke. We keep investing on infrastructure, and tomorrow you probably don't need infrastructure to give education, right? If you have an online degree, you look at upgrade, right? Upgrade or what is that learning? Our Chennai-based learning education.
Great learning.
Great learning, yeah. Great learning, yeah. They start giving degree programs, foreign degree programs. You don't even need a campus, and we need to compete against them. And then we keep investing in infrastructure. And what do you do with these classrooms and ground? And it's not even tomorrow. For example, if you build a hotel, I'm talking everything in an entrepreneur's point of view. If I build a hotel, tomorrow if hotel doesn't work, I can run it as a hospital. Or if a hotel doesn't work, I can rent it out as rooms. There is alternative utility for my infrastructure. But in an institution, we build classrooms and we build and we buy equipments, which is all past generation equipments to teach students. And what do we do with these equipments and this building built in a different way, in a way where there is no other alternative use for it. So we need to continuously think that, I don't know, I don't want to scare people, but at the same time, we need to always think. I was in investment banking before, so I always think that what if I get disrupted too heavily and I need to use my infrastructure in a different way? I should be able to do it. And how I'll ensure when I am investing in infrastructure. I keep thinking about it. So I would expect our colleagues also to think about it, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. Okay, that's again a huge challenge which higher education institutions are facing today. Yeah. So I think enough scaring has gone through. Yeah, unless we want to discuss any of these topics, we can go into the opportunities, I believe.
Yeah, let's do the opportunities, because we may soon start running out of time. We are about 10 odd minutes away.
Yeah, this can be shorter because challenges are more than opportunities today because of the sea change. But then, there are certain opportunities as well, for sure. One is, I'll go to one important thing, that education is not going to go away, right? It's not like any other field where it can be replaced by something else. Education will be there forever, right? It's an essential commodity as well. So we'll have that business for sure forever. That's certainly a big opportunity, which that we'll have tons and tons of students. Indian education is also envisioned to higher education. They are looking at an enrollment 40%, 60%, and all that, which will bring flock and flock of students into higher education. So if we structure for capitalizing those things, you have a huge opportunity. I seriously believe that there will be multiple unicorns which will be born out of higher education in India. I seriously believe in it. So we can all be in that race, but we cannot look at ourselves in the traditional model of education. We need to look at how in the new paradigm, how we will create delta, how we will do changes and things like that. We have to impact so many factors. Like my second point says, students don't meet industry mind, right? Industry is thinking different way, students are thinking different way. Students look at flocking the institutions which gets filled up, flocking the courses which gets filled up. That's how students think. Industry has a very narrow view, says that I need this guy who has learned this tool. Then I will recruit 100 guys. That's how on one end the industry is sitting. That's a challenge, but then we are sitting in between that, right? So if we bridge these two mindsets, we have a huge opportunity as well. Huge consumer base, like which I was explaining you, and content delivery technology. Okay, technology cannot be missed from talking about. If you look at top 10 startups which got invested in India in the last, we run an IIC. I am an investor also, incubation investor for always last 10 years. So in the last couple of years, during this Corona period, highest number of investment happened in education technology. Okay, yeah. Education. So there's a huge opportunity in developing technology and utilizing technology as well, right? Utilizing technology is us. Consumer of technology is us. So if you adapt the right technology in terms of content, in terms of delivery of content, how to make sure student is learning, how to make sure student is attentive, and so on and so forth. If we apply our mind, and we are all institutions who have invested crores in building infrastructure, if we invest some 10, 15 lakhs, there might be a software tool which will help us monitor faculty's efficiency, right? If we have the mind to do that, by making small investments in technology, you can really make a huge difference in the way we educate the students. And that can become a huge opportunity for all of us to grow. Okay, that's a very important thing which I feel which all of us have to capitalize in leveraging the tech and the content. Content is also big time. I keep telling my faculty, gone are the days where you are teachers, where you deliver content, you deliver information. Okay, there is no way a teacher can survive by doing that, because all that information, all that data is available, touch of the button in Google for every student. You can do whatever great content delivery you have, you can, any faculty, but better content delivery is there on the online platforms, right? So you have NPTEL professors teaching the same paper what your faculty is going to teach. IIT professor is going to teach poorer than our faculty or what. So that content is already there. Yeah. So what exactly your faculty has to do is to really make the student think. We need to teach the student how to apply mind, how to solve problems. That's the way we have to change the classrooms and the class delivery capability too. So the faculty standards is a huge challenge and a huge opportunity as well. If we can change our faculty to start importing, design thinking has to go into their mind first of all.
At
then they
Harappa,
have
we
to.
just started a faculty excellence program. I don't know if you know, but at Harappa, we've just started a program for faculty because driven by this only. But sorry, didn't mean to
Okay.
interrupt you. Yeah.
No, that's okay, sir. Yeah. I mean, we all have to work together to really change drastically the faculty standards, and they need to start thinking how to make students think, problem solve, and things like that.
Yeah.
If we do that, and if we apply the right technologies, the content delivery has to be left to the technology. Okay, then we have a huge consumer base, and then we have a huge challenge of bridging, opportunity of bridging the students and industry needs, and then we can grow into unicorns for sure. So you make small changes here and there,
Yeah.
and I am sure there is good potential to grow. For that, I think money and capital is the most important thing, and you can utilize your tax haven status. We don't pay education, formal education. We don't pay income taxes. You can utilize that. Now you have the leased land is possible. You can exploit that. And if somebody wants a specific discussion with me on how to do it, I've been working on some serious things towards that. So we can work together on that as well. So we have to utilize our huge infrastructure, which we have already built. This change of being able to lease property now has to be utilized. We have we are tax free. All these things have to be utilized to pull capital into you and actually deployed in a asset-like manner going forward. And then you have a great opportunity to create a unicorn yourself. That's
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
hopefully it interested people.
Before you go, because we do have only 5 minutes and time has flown, there are a couple of questions about entrepreneurship in education or entrepreneurship education itself. So one of the questions that Jayashree Bake from Chetna RK Institute is asking, how can one do entrepreneurship promotion in a postgraduate management institute? Somebody is asking, Robert Thor from Developing Real Learners is asking, how should university admissions change in order to promote a more entrepreneurial spirit amongst university students? So any thoughts about entrepreneurship among students and how to encourage that, how to find more entrepreneurial students? Is there something like an entrepreneurial student?
Yeah, it is there. Of course, there is a difference in thinking in different kinds of people, right? So there are specific methodologies of identifying people who have entrepreneurial thinking. I would suggest our audience to visit Niti Aayog's Atal Incubation Center and Atal Tinkering Lab websites. Okay, if needed, I can pass by certain links. Atal Tinkering Lab is a fantastic scheme. It was just giving 10 lakhs to schools. But then if you go to Atal Tinkering Lab website, there is so much content, fantastic content in there, which teaches and assesses people in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurship and all that. So we can assess students for entrepreneurship and innovation. And in general, my view on imparting entrepreneurship is fundamentally design thinking. The design thinking, how to apply your knowledge to solve problems, is a general thinking process. How to look at challenges as an opportunity, how to use your knowledge or information to solve a problem. That's a way of thinking. So if we impart design thinking to all our faculty, which is not going to be easy, which I am also only trying right now, but I have seen an institution for that matter, okay, one of my competitor who has done it, and they have seen a drastic change in the way institutions are functioning. So if each one of your faculty, from your security to, I mean, anybody in the entire organization, everybody sees each challenge they are seeing around as an opportunity and how to solve it, right? If we start making them think that way, then I think there's a huge opportunity. Once we do that to some extent to the faculty, And if you start imparting design thinking to the students as well, then they will start thinking entrepreneurial, is my view. But there is no replacement for connecting them to the challenges. Meaning, we need to take more students to the industries. We have to take them to the entrepreneurial innovation centers like AICs and so on and so forth. Like you, all of us will accept there are a lot of school students who solve problems better than college students today because they've been exposed to that environment. So I guess the exposure in terms of the challenges, right? What all challenges are there? Those exposure by taking them around the industry, innovation centers and things like that, and importing design thinking as a curriculum factor itself into all the courses, it would be a silver bullet, is my belief.
Wow. So that's a big call to action for faculty and students. And the idea, I had come up with this notion of solutionaries, people who are always trying to create solutions to problems, right? And that basically means that you have to be a design thinker. You have to first identify the problem correctly. You have to really empathize with the problem, brainstorm, innovate, and then come up with an answer that works. It's not just something theoretical and practical. Madan,
I saw one Steve Jobs statement recently. 90% of your solution is done if you have identified the problem 100%.
That's right. No, absolutely. So at Harappa, we have a course called Problem Definition for this reason.
Okay.
I think we also, in India also, we are so schooled from a very early age to give the answer, right? Because the whole psyche is that the answer exists. So if you know the answer, if you've memorized the answer, if you've actually done your homework, you will know the answer. So we are all jumping to give the answer. So if even at the workplace, I find that if you ask somebody to solve a problem, they assume that there is an answer and they start giving an answer to say, is this the right answer or not? Not realizing that they first have Sorry, I lost power for a second.
You're back.
But thank you so much for the time, and I really appreciate. This has been a fascinating 60 minutes. I'm sure the audience also made lots of notes. You spoke extempore, but I think you really thought about some of these issues, and both your insights about the disruptions as well as the kinds of opportunities that it's creating were fascinating, I thought. And it's I think partly because of your unique background and all of the things that you did before you got into education that gives a very fresh perspective and new thinking to what you had to share today. So thank you very much for
sparing
your time.
Any one of the audience, if you want any specific communication with me, you can feel free to contact me on my email or WhatsApp. I'm poor on phone calls. Sorry about it, but then WhatsApp and emails will work. They can feel free to email me. I am looking at the education across the country in different shapes and different forms, in different kinds of educations. Would like to share my thoughts and will like to collaborate opportunities as well. So we do have a EduTech company also in our AIC in that respect, or consolidation of institutions. All these things we are looking at opportunities and would like to partner with several people. So feel free to contact me through my email or WhatsApp. I can share my number.
So we've put in the your email as madan@rathinam.in.
Correct.
And if you tell us the phone number, we can put that in also.
98946.
Right.
16016.
98946 16016.
That's correct. I see that. And again, our WhatsApp would work. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I would like.
Otherwise, you'll start getting lots of calls.
I
But
don't
again,
know whether I get lots or not, but I am very poor in answering calls. That's my problem. Yeah.
that's a good way to keep your sanity. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it, and very engaging and insightful insight. We'll come back and be in touch. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you
And
so much. Thank you.
thank you to
Thank
the
you for the
audience.
opportunity to address the audience. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you everyone for joining us. We do Campus Charcha every Thursday afternoon around 4 o'clock. So please join us next time in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, Madan. Bye.
Thank you, the audience. Yeah.